Is the UK housing market actually worth it anymore? The average UK house price right now is just over £290,000. The average UK salary is about £35,000. So you're looking at a home that costs more than 8 times what you earn in a year. 8 times. Back when your parents bought their first place, that ratio was closer to 3 or 4. So here's the uncomfortable question that more and more people are asking: is buying a house in this country actually worth it anymore? Or have we all just been sold a dream that no longer adds up? Let's get into it. Right, so I think the reason this topic hits so hard is that home ownership in Britain isn't just a financial decision. It's practically a cultural identity. Your mum asks when you're getting on the ladder. Your nan talks about her house like it's the best investment she ever made. And honestly, for her generation, it probably was. If you bought a semi-detached in the Midlands in 1985 for 30 grand, and it's now worth 250,000, then yeah, property worked out brilliantly. But here's the thing. Past performance, as they love to say in the investing world, is not a guarantee of future results. And the conditions that created that incredible run of house price growth, falling interest rates over decades, loose lending, massive undersupply, population growth, some of those factors are still in play, but some of them have fundamentally changed. So let's actually do what very few people bother to do and look at the numbers properly. Not with emotion, not with what your Uncle Dave reckons down the pub, but with actual maths. Let's say you're buying a £290,000 home. You've somehow scraped together a 10% deposit, that's £29,000, which is already a heroic achievement. So you're borrowing £261,000. At a mortgage rate of, let's say, around 5% on a 5-year fix, which is roughly where we are right now, your monthly repayments are going to be somewhere around £1,500 a month. 1,500 quid. Every single month. For 25 years. Now on top of that, you've got stamp duty unless you're a first-time buyer on a property under £425,000, where you currently get some relief. But that relief has been chopped and changed so many times it's hard to keep track. You've got solicitor fees, survey costs, potentially a broker fee. Moving costs. Then once you're in, there's council tax, buildings insurance, maintenance, and all the stuff that breaks that your landlord used to fix. Boiler packs in? That's your problem now. Roof starts leaking? Your problem. That damp patch in the spare room? Yeah. Your problem. So the true cost of owning a home is significantly more than just the mortgage payment. And I think a lot of people forget that when they compare buying to renting. Now let's talk about renting for a second, because renters get an absolutely rough deal in this conversation. There's this phrase that gets thrown around constantly: renting is dead money. You've heard it. I've heard it. And honestly, it drives me a bit mad, because it's a massive oversimplification. Yes, when you rent, you don't build equity in a property. That's true. But you also don't tie up 30 grand in a deposit that could be invested elsewhere. You don't pay for repairs. You don't pay mortgage interest, which, and people really forget this, is also dead money. When you pay your mortgage each month, a huge chunk of that, especially in the early years, is just interest going straight to the bank. You're not building equity with that portion. You're paying for the privilege of borrowing. So let's run a comparison. And I want to be fair here, because this genuinely depends on individual circumstances. Scenario 1. You buy that £290,000 house. Over 25 years you pay back the mortgage plus interest, and let's say the total interest paid comes to something like £195,000. So the house has actually cost you £485,000 by the time you're done. Plus maintenance, plus all the other costs. Let's be conservative and say the house is worth £500,000 in 25 years, that assumes growth of roughly 2 to 2.5% a year, which is actually below the long-term average but probably more realistic given where prices already are. So your net gain, very roughly, is the difference between what the house is worth and what you paid in total. And once you factor in all costs, the actual return isn't nearly as spectacular as people think. Scenario 2. You rent a similar property for, let's say, £1,200 a month. Yes, rents are painful right now, no question. But you take that £29,000 deposit and invest it in a global index fund inside a stocks and shares ISA. And let's say you also invest the £300 a month difference between renting and buying. At a long-term average return of, say, 7 to 8% a year in the stock market, that money compounds seriously over 25 years. You could realistically end up with a portfolio worth £350,000, £400,000 or more, and it's all been in an ISA, so it's tax-free. Now, I'm not saying renting is definitely better. Rents go up, sometimes unpredictably. You've got less security. Your landlord could sell up. Anyone who's rented in this country knows the stress of a Section 21 notice. The Renters Reform Bill is supposed to help with that, but we'll see how it actually plays out. There are very real quality of life reasons to want to own your home, and I completely respect that. But the point is this, financially, it is nowhere near as clear-cut as people make out. The always buy advice made sense when houses cost 3 times your salary and mortgage rates were falling for 30 years straight. That world doesn't exist anymore. Now let's zoom out and talk about the bigger picture. Because whether buying is worth it also depends hugely on where you are in the country. The UK housing market isn't one market. It's hundreds of little markets all behaving differently. If you're in London, the average house price is still over £500,000. In some boroughs it's way beyond that. The price-to-earnings ratio in London is genuinely insane. We're talking 12, 13, 14 times average earnings in some areas. For a lot of people, buying in London without family help or a seriously high income is just not realistic. Full stop. But if you're in parts of the North East, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the Midlands, there are still areas where you can buy a decent home for £150,000 or £180,000. And at those prices, with a reasonable deposit, the math starts to look very different. Your mortgage payment might actually be less than rent. That's where buying can still make a lot of sense, especially if you plan to stay put for a good while. And that brings me to something really important, your time horizon. Property is not a short-term investment. If you're buying a house and you think you might move in 2 or 3 years, you need to be really careful. Transaction costs in the UK are brutal. Stamp duty, estate agent fees, legal fees, you could easily burn through £15,000 to £20,000 just buying and selling. So if the property hasn't appreciated enough to cover those costs, you could actually lose money. The general rule of thumb is that you probably need to stay in a property for at least 5 years, and ideally longer, for buying to beat renting financially. If you're someone who moves around a lot for work, or you're not sure where you want to settle, renting might genuinely be the smarter financial move, and there is absolutely no shame in that. Alright, let's talk about some of the schemes that are supposed to help. The Lifetime ISA lets you save up to £4,000 a year towards your first home, and the government tops it up by 25%. So you put in £4,000, you get a £1,000 bonus. That's genuinely good, and if you're a first-time buyer under 40, you should seriously look at this. But there are catches. The property has to be £450,000 or under, and if you withdraw for anything other than a first home or retirement, you get hit with a 25% penalty, which actually means you lose more than the bonus you were given. So it needs to be a deliberate decision. Shared ownership is another option, where you buy a share of a property and pay rent on the rest. It can work for some people, but it comes with complications. You're paying a mortgage and rent, service charges can be steep, and selling a shared ownership property can be a nightmare. Do your homework on this one. And then there's the Bank of Mum and Dad, which, whether we like it or not, has become one of the biggest lenders in the UK property market. Something like a third of first-time buyers now get help from family. Which is great if your family can do that, but it also means the housing market is increasingly divided between those who have family wealth and those who don't. And that's a structural problem that no amount of government schemes is really solving. So, after all of that, is the UK housing market actually worth it anymore? Here's my honest take. Buying a home is still worth it for the right person, in the right area, at the right time, with the right expectations. If you're buying somewhere you plan to live for a long time, in an area where prices are reasonable relative to local incomes, and you can comfortably afford the payments without stretching yourself to breaking point, then yes, it can absolutely still be a good decision. The security of knowing it's yours, the stability, the fact that one day you'll have no mortgage payment at all, those things genuinely matter. But if you're buying purely because you think it's the only way to build wealth, or because everyone tells you renting is throwing money away, or because you feel like a failure for not being on the ladder, please, take a step back. Run the numbers for your specific situation. Look at what you could do with that deposit money if you invested it instead. Think about your flexibility, your career plans, your mental health. Don't let societal pressure push you into the biggest financial commitment of your life before you're ready. The housing market might still be worth it. But it's no longer the guaranteed golden ticket that previous generations enjoyed. And being honest about that isn't pessimism, it's just good financial planning. Right, I'd love to know what you think. Are you trying to buy right now? Have you decided renting actually suits you better? Or maybe you've bought and you're wondering if it was the right call. Drop it in the comments, I read them, and honestly, some of the best conversations on this channel happen down there. If you found this useful, give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. I put out new videos every week breaking down the money stuff that actually affects your life here in the UK, no jargon, no nonsense, just straight talk. And if you want to go deeper on investing the deposit money I mentioned, I've got a video on stocks and shares ISAs right here that walks you through the whole thing step by step. I'll see you in the next one.